Are sleepless nights leaving you and your child exhausted? In this episode, we'll dive into why your little one is waking up every 2 hours, and more importantly, how you can fix it and support your little one with their sleep habits. With the sleep principles, you're going to learn some simple strategies to help your child and yourself finally get the restful nights that you deserve. In our most sleep deprived moments, our children will teach us exactly what we need in order to learn and grow into who we were created to be. These are the loving lessons we will learn whether we were wanting to or not. I'm Irene Googe, your sleep coach, and I'm on mission to educate parents on how to help their young children sleep. Welcome to the journey. Hello, and welcome to the Loving Lessons Learned podcast. I'm so glad you're here joining me, where we are talking about all things sleep and parenting, and of course, the lessons we learn from our little ones. And of course, sometimes when we are being woken up at night, 1, 2, or 5 or more times at night, that can be really exhausting. And so today we're going to talk about what you actually really need to sleep. And I'm going to just share a little secret with you that this isn't just for kiddos. This is actually true for everyone who needs to sleep, and why your baby is waking up every 2 hours. And hopefully you're going to see what you need to do and why you would need to do that. And then we're going to dive into the sleep principles, which is a strategy that you can use, a framework that's going to help you not only start getting sleep, but then keep sleep in place in the long run. So first, let's talk about what you need to sleep. A lot of times it can be really confusing because many parents, when they're reaching out to me, they're like, I know I need to sleep train my little one. Or if I just put my child on a schedule, then they would be sleeping. And what I want to share with you is that sometimes when we start with that strategy, that actually can backfire for us. And so one of the things that is important to know as far as like strategy, if you're like, where do I get started? What do I need to really think about when it comes to sleep? Is we need to think about these 4 things: feeling safe and secure, satiated, settled and comfortable, and sufficient sleep pressure to help us sleep. Now, that's true for all of us as human beings because it's really hard to trust and let go if we're not feeling safe and secure. But the question comes down to, how do we create this environment in a place where we're showing up and being rested? And I find that this is oftentimes one of the biggest challenges for myself and many other parents in the parenting journey. Oftentimes, we don't come from a place of rest. We don't come from a place of feeling calm and confident in the decisions we're making. And one of the things that I hear oftentimes from parents is like, I don't have time for that. And where I would challenge you is to think about, what are some of the ways that we can practice rest throughout the day? So let's talk about what it looks like to actually have a strategy where we're focused on having our little ones feel safe and secure. The sleep principles are where we show up, lead environments, empower, and play. This sleep principle framework helps us recognize the tools and the strategies that we'll need to employ to help our child sleep. The good news about this is that regardless of our child's temperament and our temperament, everybody can do this. And that is because everything is learnable, which is really good news. And when we learn to show up as feeling rested, calm, and confident, we make better decisions in our parenting. It then opens a door for us to actually lead our little ones through the routines of the day with trust and respect. The other piece of this puzzle when it comes to helping our little ones sleep is that we end up creating environments that are actually going to communicate the rhythm and the routine of the day, and it's going to actually serve and support us in our parenting. Oftentimes, establishing those environments that communicate those shared expectations can make all the difference in how we set our child up for sleep coaching success. The other thing that happens as we go through this process is that not only are we empowering our child, but we are also empowering ourselves and going through a learning process together. It allows us this moment to embrace what's actually taking place in our home and not feel like we have to change things, but we can show up and be who we were designed to be and how we can lead our little ones through the day. And it actually feel really good for you. And the last piece of the sleep principles is thinking about play, having fun as you move through the days, and you're going to be the parent you want to be. And what's going to be awesome is you're going to create this connection with your child that is just going to be enjoyable and fun and create peace and calm for everybody. So, like I said, a lot of times parents want to jump right into the strategy. And so, if you're thinking, what is my strategy? I really want you to go back to and think about how you're creating that safety and security, making sure your little one is satiated and making sure they feel settled and comfortable with sufficient sleep pressure before they go to sleep. And part of that process and how we end up showing up, that's really important, is thinking about the stories that we're telling ourselves. And the stories that we're telling ourselves often has to do with the thoughts that we're having. And what most of us don't realize is that we are bombarded with thousands of thoughts in a day. And believe it or not, most of them are not serving us well. Most of them are negative thoughts that are sabotaging our sleep and our relationships and how we're showing up doing life. And so I want you to just stop and think about the thoughts that you're having. Some people, even as you're listening to this podcast, as you're watching this podcast, you might be thinking like, I don't know if this is true. I usually think good thoughts. But then all of a sudden you don't realize, like, when you're in those hard moments, our brain goes to the negative. And that is just common. And that is how we are wired. And so it really is our work to show up and change the way we're thinking. And having that awareness, bringing some awareness to what we're even thinking, which takes practice. One of the things when I'm working with my family is, whether it's as a sleep coach or postpartum doula or in our group coaching sessions, is we're thinking about our thinking, because it's really important, because the way we think is going to impact how we show up, how we are being in that present moment. And that can be really hard to come from a place of rest. Now, I've heard people say like, oh, it's easy for you to say. It is definitely easier to say than do. But one of the things that I have found is that in my personal journey, it has not always been easy. It has been a struggle and a challenge to learn to reframe my thinking. And the way we learn to speak to ourselves and to others is also a process. And part of that is how we continue to practice showing up. So when I'm working with families, that's where it's important to think about having support and coaching in place that's going to help you along the journey. Now, I can just share with you that this last week, I just ended a time with a family, and mom had said, she was like, I'm really sad that we're not going to continue working together. But she's like, I also feel very grateful and equipped for the next season. She's like, you've been teaching me and we've been practicing how I can show up and then following through with these sleep principles. And so she realized like how she's questioning her thoughts, how she's becoming aware of how she's showing up for her newborn, how she's showing up for her older kiddos. Things like that really matter, because a lot of times most parents might be in multiple seasons where you have, a newborn and a toddler, or maybe you have an elementary age child or a teenager and a younger child. So no matter what season of life we're in, we can apply these sleep principles, which will then also in turn protect our sleep, just as parents, as people, so that we can sleep well. And so I know that you're probably wondering, well, why is my child waking up every 2 hours? Well, I want to dive into a little bit of the science here. You're going to take a look at the sleep cycles. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to encourage you to check out the blog post so you can see the images of the sleep cycles and the sleep stages that I share. But if you're watching this, you'll see it up on your screen here, where, when we look at the sleep cycles, we can see the process that our little ones are going through. And our children are transitioning between a light sleep and a deep sleep. Now, one of the things that I have observed in hundreds of children, like I've helped so many children personally learn the skill of putting themselves to sleep. And it's that process leading up to bedtime. Because when we feel safe and secure, when we're satiated, those are the two pieces that help us feel confident in our little ones to sleep. We get that just right timing. That allows our little ones to just settle, drift off, and let go to sleep. Because biologically, that is how we're wired. But it's really hard if we're feeling dysregulated. And oftentimes when we're feeling dysregulated, we're kind of in this overwhelmed, panicked state. So that's where having flexible routines really helps us learn to go to sleep. And so when we create that bedtime or nap time routine, and then we observe our child going through the sleep cycles, you'll notice that our children are in a light state of sleep, where we notice some active movements. They're typically in what is called REM active sleep. So we see those little motions. And then they transition into a deep sleep, which is what we're all desiring to have. When we look at Instagram pictures or photos of sleeping babies, that's typically what we're seeing. But the reality is we transition back into the light state of sleep, and there's some movement and motion. So it's important to just know and understand that there's these sleep transitions that are happening between sleep cycles. And one of the things that I will share with you is that when we really look at temperament, and I'm going to share a link to the post with temperament as well as parenting styles, because I think that they're linked in terms of how we end up showing up with our little ones. It's important to know that like sometimes our little ones are noticing all of the details and they're just very aware. And so we want to be able to be there and support them through their process. And that's when we're leading our little ones through the bedtime and nap time routines to let them settle and drift off to sleep. Now, let's go back to the main question that I know you had was, why is my child waking up every 2 hours? Well, if we take a look at this sleep stages chart, you're going to notice in the left-hand corner, the little bed, which is 6 p.m. We're just saying somewhere between 6 and 8 o'clock, our children are ready to go to sleep in that window. And then you're going to see on the other side of the chart, 6 a.m. with the sunshine, somewhere between 6 and 7:30, our little ones are ready to wake up. There's a link to the sleep chart so you can see how much sleep your little one needs based on their age and stage. So what's important to know is that the way we fall asleep is really what matters the most, which is why when I'm working with families, that's why we stay focused on what does it look like when our little one is going to sleep. Now, if you take a look at that first set, we're going down doing the bedtime routine in that green little area. The pink line is where our little ones start falling into a REM active state of sleep. And stage 1 is light sleep. So when our little ones are first drifting off, they're going to notice their sleep environment, which is why creating environments that are going to be conducive and helpful to support you in the sleep process are really key. So having a nice dark room, a sound machine that becomes that physical cue that allows your child to know it's time to go to sleep, doing a routine that includes a sleep sack or maybe a blanket or getting a little one's lovey if you have a toddler or preschooler. Those sorts of signals also help communicate to the body, yep, it's time to go to sleep. And having a nice cool temperature and keeping it nice and dark can all help promote better sleep, because then the brain is saying, okay, I know what to do right now. And then after we drift off to sleep, our little ones will fall into a deeper sleep. But of course, our bodies cycle through this light sleep, deep sleep phases throughout the night, which is why it's actually a myth that we even sleep through the night, because we all wake up 2 to 6 times at night, depending on how our body cycles. And so if you take a look at the stage 1, that yellow zone, the one thing I can kind of share with you is that that is typically where we will start to notice our little ones have these partial arousals. They wake up. Sometimes we notice them and sometimes we don't. The parents who notice them are usually the ones who are reaching out for help because their little one is waking up and saying, hey, mom, hey, dad, could you come do that thing you do at bedtime to help me go back to sleep. So that's why thinking about looking at what are you doing at that bedtime that helps your child go to sleep. So that's where we want to create a routine that's going to support our little one in letting go and drifting off. Now, in general, most routines, with a newborn and infant are going to include a feed, and then we will maybe do a little bath, change into jammies, diaper, read a book, sing a song, and then get into the crib. Now, with our toddlers and preschoolers, typically they'll have already eaten during dinner time. And so they're not going to have that milk, maybe before bed. And then they're going to just go through the bedtime routine where they maybe do the bath, put on their jammies, go to the potty, brush their teeth, and then get ready to read some books, sing a song, and then into the crib or the bed, depending on our child's age. So those are some things to think about as we're creating these bedtime routines that work for children. And so the way our little ones fall asleep really matters. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because sometimes parents will say, well, I'll hold you to sleep, or I'll rock you, or I'll feed you, or whatever it is that you do. For some children, it's not a big deal. You could do that and then they sleep through the night and that works out great. But for some children and some temperaments, they notice. They notice all of those details, which is where we go back to the bedtime routine or the onset of nap and look at what is my little one learning about how to go to sleep here. And that's where I'm going to encourage you to focus your energy. So if you're like, what do I need to do different? Take a look and notice how your little one falls asleep. Because as you look at the sleep stages here, every one of those partial arousals, sometimes parents will tell me, you know what? They wake up at the beginning of the night, but it's super easy to get back to sleep. And the reason it's easier is because your little one is going to have deeper sleep at the beginning part of the night. But if you look at the time frame, kind of from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., you're going to notice that they don't go back into that deep sleep. They stay in a lighter, active sleep. So that's why you notice all of those wake ups. Now, if you're like, okay, I get this. How do I make that change? Well, I'll encourage you to set up a time on my calendar. I'm always happy to connect with families and look at what's going on, getting to the root cause, like why and what's holding your little one back from getting that good sleep. And of course, there's so many different variables when it comes to the families that I've worked with. No family is the same. So it is figuring out what is going on in your situation with your child and your family. And we all have different rhythms and routines, and working to find a way that not only helps support our lifestyles, but also promotes healthy sleep habits is also beneficial. So we can hop on a call. And if you're like, I am just ready to start making changes, then I'd love to invite you to the group coaching program called Sleep Coaching Success, where we dive into this weekly and we have sessions where we talk about all things parenting and navigating the bedtime routines and sleep routines for naps so that we can help get your little one getting the sleep that they need and you getting the sleep you need, so everybody gets a break and everybody gets to refresh and restore because we have good, healthy sleep habits. So I know you might be wondering, well, this all sounds great. Like, we know what we need. We know why our little one's waking up every 2 hours, because whatever we do at bedtime, they want that in the middle of the night. Every single time they wake up, because that's what they know about going to sleep. Because whatever you do at bedtime is what your little one is going to expect during those partial arousals for those night wakings. So that's why it's important for us to really think about what's happening at the onset of bedtime, at the onset of nap time. So when our little one is transitioning between a light sleep to a deep sleep, they'll know how to get back on track. Now, if you're listening to this, I'm going to encourage you to check out the Breathe Love Guide. You're going to see right there where you can learn the framework that I share with families. And you might be wondering, well, what is Breathe Love? Well, here's the thing. We don't realize, again, those thoughts that we're having, they are typically coming from a place of fear and judgment. We get nervous, or we get angry, or we get frustrated, which are all normal, common emotions, and they're not going to go away. I wish they would, but they're not. But we can notice and observe those emotions. And we can choose to breathe love into them, which means we're going to listen, observe, validate, and empower our situations that we go through the day. And when you download the Breathe Love Guide, you'll get my free mini training to help you show up and not feel chaotic, but to have that calm. And this is actually a really great practice to begin doing now and building our muscle as we are learning to show up, to be calm and to be confident in the decisions that we're making with our little ones. Parenting is not an easy journey, but parenting can become easier when we set ourselves up for success, when we learn and become equipped with the tools we need to help us lead our little ones and create environments that are actually also going to support us. And those are those flexible routines that we can lead our little ones through. And then we don't have to feel so restricted and rigid, because you know what? We can feel empowered and play with our little ones. So I hope that these sleep principles help you have a better night of sleep. And I hope you know and understand what it is that you really need to get sleep for your child and for yourself. And this will hopefully help you sleep longer and be rested. Thanks for tuning into today's show. You can see all of the details and show notes below. And as you go out into your day, I hope that you'll make it your mission to be calm, confident, and rested as you lead today. Sweet dreams.